Looking back on the combat and systems of Xenoblade 2, I was always surprised with how seemingly balanced the game was, with plenty of strategies and setups being able to take on some of even the toughest challenges. There's always a part of me that wished there were some more absurd things, being capable of taking down anything in a matter of seconds. Well, wish no more, because now we have Xenoblade 3. Before I get fully into this, a bit of a disclaimer. This video assumes that you have finished the game and are looking for the strongest strategies now that you have every combat option available to you. The first half of the video will still be spoiler free, and I'll put a warning when the spoiler content and classes will start to be shown. With that said, I'm going to cover the general ideas of Xenoblade 3 advanced combat strategies and explain what approaches do and don't work, and afterwards cover specific builds and team compositions to best utilize each class. And without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, the most important part of any team composition is going to be how the damage is dealt, and this is the primary job of the attacker classes. Before going into specific setups of attackers, I'm going to explain how damage in this game actually works, and how to best optimize it with this knowledge. The damage formula is as follows: the character's attack stat, multiplied by the damage ratio of the art, multiplied by the sum of all of the additive damage boosts, and then multiplied by all of the independent damage boosts. Now, this may seem complicated at first, but it can be broken down into smaller pieces. Firstly, the character's attack stat. The attack stat is determined by the character's base stat, the class they are using, and the weapon they are using. Now, each character will have a different base stat that is multiplied by a number that depends on the class used. For example, Noah has a base attack stat of 388 at max level, and the Sword Fighter class has an attack multiplier of 1.15x, meaning that his new base attack is 446. Next, the weapon of the sword is added on, which is 575, making a level 99 Noah's base attack as a Sword Fighter 1021. The weapon has one more factor known as a stability, which randomly changes the value that the weapon attack is, but it's usually a relatively small difference. The sword weapon has a stability of 8%, so its power can actually range from 575 to 621. But if Noah uses the Master Art Wide Slash, suddenly he has a Sword Fighter class using the weapon of the Zephyr class. So instead, the attack stat will be 446 of the Sword Fighter class, same as before, but this time the Zephyr's weapon will be added on top, instead of the Sword Fighter's weapon, which is a little lower than the Sword Fighter's at 524, making his total attack while using the Wide Slash to be 970. Fusion Arts can also change this up a little bit. If he instead did a Wide Slash fused to an Edge Thrust, both arts would use the Sword Fighter weapon, even though the Wide Slash is still a Zephyr art. To be exact, the class determines most of the base stats, while the weapon influences the weapon's attack, the critical hit rate of the art, and the block rate. So keep these factors in mind when deciding which arts to use. On average, attacker classes usually have the more powerful weapons than defenders and healers. The next part of the formula is the art's ratio, which is pretty simple. Each art has a damage ratio associated with it, such as Air Slash having a ratio of 400%. So with no attack boosts whatsoever, Noah using an Air Slash is going to do his total attack times the 400% or 4 ratio, which would be 1021 of the base attack times 4, or 4084 damage, which is the base damage that this art will do. Usually ratio is the first thing to look at if attack art is good or not, but sometimes there are good enough bonus effects to use a low ratio art over a higher one. Of course, this number of 4084 looks very small for a maxed out Sword Fighter class, and this is where the other damage boosts come in. The most common type of damage boost is what is known as an additive, because all of the damage boosts are added together to find the total boost. For example, Edge Thrust has a damage boost of 150% when attacking from behind, and the Sword Fighter class has a skill that also gives an additional 150% damage boost against unique monsters and bosses. The damage boosts are both additive, so the total boost of using both would be the 100% of base damage, plus 150% of the art, plus 150% of the skill, meaning that the art damage gets multiplied by 4 times. This would mean that additives have diminishing returns, however, as in a scenario where the first additive would be a 50% increase, it would multiply the damage by 1.5x, but a second one won't make the total damage go up to 1.5 times 1.5 of 2.5x, but instead the additives are added together, making the total damage boost 2x. So the key takeaway of additive damage is that they are easy to get, but it's better to diversify where your damage boosts come from, rather than using all of your resources to only find additive damage boosts. This brings us to the last and arguably most important part of the damage formula, the independent damage boosts, which all of the independent boosts are multiplied together rather than the additive boosts, but because of this benefit, they oftentimes are harder to come by than additives. There are a lot of different places that the independent damage boost can come from, so I'll just run through them all quickly. A critical hit will be a 1.25x independent damage multiplier at base, but it's also pretty easy to increase, getting up to over 3 times in some setups. The damage ratio of a chain attack is self-explanatory and independent, and I can go into a full chain attack guide in another video. Decreasing an enemy's defenses can go into negatives, like with the skill Ultimate Qigong, and an enemy with negative defense will be hit by an independent multiplier. For example, a negative 50% defense stat will make arts do 1.5x damage. Hitting a launched enemy will also give a flat 1.25x independent multiplier to damage. Inflicting burst will give that art that did it a 1.5x multiplier, and I'll cover smash damage shortly, which has its own special rules. Some specific accessories, such as Shackle Ring, will give independent multipliers when a series of arts are stringed together in quick succession. Each art gets a bonus effect while fused, and most single target damage arts will get a fusion bonus of 1.5x damage as an independent multiplier, so fusion damage arts together will oftentimes result in more damage dealt than if you used the 2 arts separately. Additionally, area of effect arts get a bonus of 1.5x range instead of damage, which is much less powerful most of the time, and generally, which is why single target high damage arts can sometimes be valued over slightly higher ratio AoE arts. Canceling an art from an auto attack or another art will give damage boosts if the art says so, like with Air Slash, or if you have the Empowered Combo gem equipped. The Empowered Combo gem bonus is 1.75x multiplier at a rank 10 gem, so it's always a good idea to cancel arts if you have this gem or are using cancel boosting damage arts like Air Slash. There are also temporary damage boosts that go away after you use the art that are independent. In this category is the Power Charge buff and a couple of talent arts that use up something to use it, like the Martial Artist talent art Raging Force. Power Charge is a 50% boost at base, but because it is a buff, it can be increased to 93% with the right setup. Raging Force is one of the largest multipliers in the entire game, being 613% if you have all other 6 arts charged and are ready to use when you use the Raging Force. Smash damage is different, being extra damage to an enemy when it gets smashed back into the ground rather than a boost to the damage of the smash art itself. The way that smash damage works is like an independent, where the damage of the slam is based off of the damage of the art that did the smash, including all hits like in a fusion art smash, times a special smash multiplier. The smash multiplier is 1.5 plus the frames of the launch remaining times 0.03, or 1.5 plus 0.9 times the second of launch remaining, because the game runs at 30 frames per second. This means that smashing on a launch that is about to expire will only give a smash multiplier of 1.5, but a smash right at the start of a launched enemy is much higher. Launch duration as well as topple duration is 5 seconds at base, 3.75 on hard, and the launch time is equal to the base launch time plus the time left that is a toppled enemy. So a perfect topple plus launch will keep the enemy launched for 10 seconds in the air on normal difficulty, making the slam equal to 10.5 times the damage of the smash art that inflicted it. This smash multiplier is huge, and therefore is the key to many advanced strategies in this game. Therefore, with all of this in mind, the best way to use an attacker is to find a setup that can take advantage of all of these bonuses into account, using a variety of different damage sources, high power arts, and finding an opportunity to string together large chains of moves for massive damage. Attackers have one other notable strength, being their combo potential. Combos aren't exclusive to attacker classes necessarily, but the two best combo classes are both attackers, so I might as well mention it here. Landing breaks at key moments in fights are important, as they can stop an oncoming enemy attack as well as allowing for the enemy to be toppled. From there, a quick launch into smash will be able to take care of most fights, or at least do a significant amount of damage. Next, let's look at specific setups and gear that attacker classes can use to be able to do this damage. For accessories, there are usually a few key things you want to look for. Generally, every single attacker build is going to run an accessory that can boost its attack stat further. The best of these are going to be the Citan rings, the Sapphire belt, or the Steam belt, with Citan rings being the strongest of them. The accessories can essentially be considered an independent damage boost this way that's always active, so Citan rings will give you a 40% increase to damage as long as you equip them, with no other requirements. Next up, it's often common that you'll also use a additive damage boosting accessory. The best ones for these are accessories that can target specific enemies types, like Terrestrial for the Hermit Mask and so forth. Lunae rings will add a 100% additive damage increase to both arts when they're used in a fusion art together, so that's another easy way to get high damage. The Fiber Wraps gives a 110% additive, which is a little bit higher, but it requires the enemy to be launched, so oftentimes you'll only want to run this on a setup that's set up for doing smash damage, or if you have a setup that's capable of keeping an enemy launched consistently. The third accessory is usually devoted to increasing the crit rate, but this doesn't always have to be the case. In terms of crit rate increasing accessories, the best ones are going to be the Thermo Headgear for most classes, or the Mercury rings for classes that have a high weapon crit rate already, therefore increasing it even further. Other useful accessories to consider are the defense bypassing accessories such as the Warped White Brooch or Accomplished Headband. These are usually better on Ether attackers, however. There is also the Fraternal Badge, which can increase art recharge rate by 50% when a defender isn't targeted, so this is usually better on a build where you aren't using any defender classes to keep this always active. On breakers, you're naturally going to want something to decrease the break resistance of the enemy, which the best accessories for this are the Break Brooch or the Accomplished Vambrace. And lastly, the Shaka Ring can also be used on setups that use debuffs, combos, or trying to shrink to other arts for very large talent art damage, but this one is less common and more so for specific class setups. Skills are usually a little easier to decide to use than accessories. Notably, the skill Ultimate Qigong will decrease the enemy's physical defense by 50 percentage point. Always use this on physical attackers if possible, as this will give you one of the largest damage increases of all the skills. You're also going to want skills to further increase the critical rate, notably Cypher Edge for the shorter fights, and Eye for weak points and longer ones where you're able to stack up the bonus to be much larger. Critical Strike is an okay skill to use if you have a sufficient enough crit rate. It's an additional 50% critical damage, but there are other ways to get even higher critical damage than just this skill. Additionally, if you're using a defenderless build, same as the Fraternal Badge, you can use the skill Protector's Pride, which has the exact same effect. And lastly, there's small additive damage boosts, like Fighting Prowess, and these are usually a last resort sort of situation, and not usually recommended. The largest additive damage increase is Universal Annihilation, for a 150% additive against launched enemies, but this is the same as the Fiber Wraps, where it's usually only effective if you have a setup capable of smashing, or keeping an enemy consistently launched. Gems are even easier than skills. There are two gems that you're pretty much always going to want to have on all damage dealers, which are Analyze Weakness and Empowered Combo. These give you 70% critical damage and 75% cancel damage, respectively, and these are essentially free independent damage boosts to everything you do, and they're just very easy and no reason to not use them. The last one is more of a flex slot. You can usually use Zero Cleaver for a small attack boost. It's better on smash builds or defenderless, and if you are using defenders, Disperse Bloodlust also works pretty well to help the defenders keep the aggro so the attackers don't generate as much. As for Master Arts, there are a few that are particularly useful from both factions. As for Keva's Master Arts, there is Hidden Thorn, which is a high ratio and can inflict a bleed debuff on enemies that can get hit with the debuff, as well as Fatal Bite, which is a slightly lower ratio than Hidden Thorn, but it has a shorter cooldown, so there are scenarios where you'd rather use that one instead. There's Shield Bash and Soaring Tempest, which can topple and launch respectively, and these are good on classes that aren't mainly for damage dealing, but can combo more effectively. And these ones are usually used in tandem with a Shackle Ring or accessories that can increase the duration of the combo. The last art is incredibly powerful, which is Quick Draw. Quick Draw is actually a bugged Master Art when it's fused from an Agnes class onto a Kevis Master Art, where it does double damage and gives you extra talent gauge charge because of a programming oversight where the damage correction formula was not applied to the Quick Draw when it's fused. Agnes Master Arts usually aren't quite as universally powerful, but there are some specific ones that have powerful uses as well. Notably, Jackal Claw and Area Slash, which have the exact same effect of a high ratio, a high critical hit rate bonus, and evades attacks during the duration of the art. This is very powerful, and if you can fuse it to a art with a long duration, you can evade multiple attacks even. Flame Lord is a low ratio, but it's a very fast cooldown, allowing you to use it multiple times, and it's a positional to charge talent gauge more quickly. Lastly, in a more specific setups, there is Mighty Beat, which you can fuse to a high ratio art for massive smash damage, and this is one of the key arts in dealing damage cap smashes to enemies. They aren't quite as vital to a team, and that's it for a few reasons, but they do have strengths in their own right. The main problem defenders have is because of the skill Protector's Pride and the accessory Fraternal Badge. As discussed before, both boost art recharge by 50% when a non-defender character is being targeted. The question then becomes, do I want to use a defender in my team to take the damage, or do I want all of my arts to recharge twice as fast? And usually, the recharge wins out. And you simply have to find other ways to keep the enemy from taking out your attackers, usually with combos or other survivability options. However, a team that does use defenders can still do well as a well set up defender can make survivability very easy, allowing the attackers to focus more on pure damage rather than having to add in survival kills tools into their kit, rather than better damaging arts. There are two main effective ways to avoid damage, what I will call face tanking and dodge tanking. Face tanking is exactly what it sounds like, getting hit but finding ways to make the damage be a negligible amount. There are three important stats to consider when face tanking: block rate, base defense, and damage reduction. Blocking an attack will reduce the damage significantly, so a high block rate will allow for this reduction to trigger consistently. Classes like Heavy Guard and Lost Vanguard have very high block rates. Each class also has base physical and ether defenses, and they dictate how much incoming damage is reduced by. A high block rate and defense stats can reduce damage taken to nearly a quarter of what it would be, with no extra action required. However, this is still much less than what damage reduction can do. One more part of the damage formula is that it is multiplied by 100% minus the damage reduction a character has. Damage reduction is normally 0, and there are arts, buffs, skills, and accessories that can increase this damage reduction. When damage reduction reaches 100%, damage taken is reduced all the way down to 0, so getting to that 100% reduction is the primary goal of face tanking. And getting to that number is surprisingly easy. The Shield Belt accessory gives 30% damage reduction at a pretty small cost of 50% additive damage less. The Stance art, Solid Stance, does the exact same, but 25% damage reduction and minus 25% additive damage. The Defense Up buff gives 15% reduction at base, rising to 28% with enough buff power. Add in a skill for 15 more and a field attack for another 15 per, and all of that damage reduction together is worth 113%. And that is easier to reach than you would think, taking no incoming damage, keeping the party completely safe as long as you can hold the aggro. Dodge tanking is the other strategy to escape damage. Dodge tanking's main problem is how the agility stat works. Dodging an attack normally involves comparing the character's agility stat to the enemy's dexterity stat, and the larger the difference, the higher the chance of dodging the attack. Except post-game enemies, especially super bosses, have such high dexterity that reaching enough agility is essentially impossible. However, there is also the evasion stat, which works very similar to damage reduction, where the chance to dodge an attack is essentially just equal to the evasion stat. Now, there isn't enough evasion stacking methods like damage reduction to reach complete invincibility this way, but it is a better option than agility, where agility essentially is worthless. There are also arts that can give 100% evasion chance while the art's animation is active, like Zephyr's Wide Slash, Jackal Claw, or Aerial Slash like I discussed before, as well as Quick Draw. There are several setups that can get enough art recharge speed alongside crit recharge skills to reach 100% uptime on these evasion arts, infinitely canceling them into each other, reaching essentially complete invincibility, just like a face tank with 100% damage reduction. However, All of this survivability is worth nothing if you can't get the enemy to target the defender, which is where taking and holding the aggro comes in. Aggro is primarily gained when dealing damage and lost over time when taking damage. Because attackers are the highest damage dealers, they have a tendency to take aggro over the lower damage defenders. There are 3 solutions to this: increase the defender's aggro in other ways, make the attackers generate less aggro, or make the defenders deal more damage. The latter 2 are much more effective than any artificial aggro generation can be. Even the attackers, the Covert Strike skill or Dispersed Bloodlust gem will significantly reduce their aggro generated, and giving them both will make them generate 0 aggro altogether. Using similar damage increasing methods discussed in the attacker section on top of the survivability methods is also a very effective way at making defenders hold the aggro. Generally, it is a better idea to give the defenders more damage increasing accessories and gems than aggro increasing ones. Therefore, the overall goal of a defender is to get more aggro than the attackers through solid damage dealing and aggro reduction on the attackers, and then using the powerful survivability tools at their hands to ensure that they can withstand whatever the enemy throws at them. In terms of build setup, tanks are very similar to attackers due to their need to also do damage to keep aggro sustained, but usually the weakest boosts are cut in favor of survivability options, such as the ones previously discussed. The shield belt accessory, solid stance art, and evasion arts like Jackal Claw and Quick Draw are usually the ones to go for. And lastly, we are at the support or healer classes. Going from the weakest of the 3 roles in previous games, support now arguably the strongest, being able to keep the rest of the party alive while increasing their damage potential to huge proportions. Supports have 4 main goals: healing, reviving, buffing, and art recharge. Firstly, healing. Healing is straightforward. Use healing arts to bring low health allies back to near full. The best way to do this is to get a high healing power of the class with a high base power and equipping a Solace Rings or other accessory to boost the stat further. And then using a fused healing art for an additional 1.25 bonus. Done right, the classes with the healing art are able to heal several thousand health every few seconds this way. There is also what I like to call the trickle heal through regeneration fields and more low healing power effects, like heal on damage arts. However, this setup is usually weaker, as most enemies have very high damage burst potential, and therefore burst healing is needed to quickly offset it. Overall, healing is more of a nice to have thing rather than an always mandatory setup like in previous games, as seen with the next goal that support has. And that goal will be reviving. When an ally falls, a support needs to stand by them and revive them for a few seconds, bringing them back with a small fraction of health. However, there are skills and gems that can make reviving much more effective than this. For instance, a rank 10 Soothing Breath and Life-Saving Expertise gem will be able to revive an ally much faster and with over half health, compared to the slow and small amount of health without these gems. This makes reviving incredibly easy, and an ally dying not to be that worrying. Add on skills that Medic Gunner and War Medic have, and it is possible to revive allies nearly twice as fast, or even revive them to completely full health. It ends up being that reviving is often easier to do than healing, and nearly as effective, allowing the rest of the support's kit to be dedicated to the next 2 goals rather than healing arts. Buffs. Buffs are the reason supports are so powerful in this game, and there are few setups that can do it better than anything else. The best buff generators are the classes Signifer and Soul Hacker, with Signifer being able to apply random buffs to itself and then spread them to the rest of the party, while the Soul Hacker having a very wide range of arts to choose from, meaning that choosing which buffs to give to the party can be set up in plenty of ways. Soul Hacker in particular has an incredibly potent buff, being able to give the party 46% additive damage, 37% art recharge, 46% crit rate, and 93% crit power, all in a single fusion art. This is done by using a fusion art of the art's Battle Pheromone and Desperate Charge together, and a gem and a skill together increase the potency of these buffs by 85%. On top of that, the same build can also remove all debuffs, grant the party Power Charge, give 28% damage reduction, and place down regeneration fields for healing. This build is likely the strongest in the entire game and would allow so much of the advanced post-game setups to function in the first place. It will be discussed further in a later section. Signifer, on the other hand, provides random buffs and can pass them to the party. While weaker than Soul Hacker's buffs, it can sometimes randomly get powerful defensive buffs that the Soul Hacker cannot give. Passing buffs, being separate from creating them, also allows for Signifer to get the Power Charge buff and continually repass it back to the party as it is used up after a single art use. Therefore, most meta comps use both a soul hacker and a buff passer of some sort, to both generate the strong buffs, while also being able to repeatedly give power charge back to the attackers and defenders. Some support classes are also able to create fields on top of getting the buff passing art from Signifer, such as Medic Gunner and War Medic, and these fields are also valuable. On top of these buffs that can be applied from these classes, there is one more buff, but it's the most difficult to generate out of all the buffs, and that is the Awakening buff. Awakening is incredibly powerful, giving 75% additive damage, 50% recharge, and 25% damage reduction all in a single buff. However, this Awakening can only be generated from the Deflector Field Talent art from the Guardian Commander or the Seraph skill. You can get it to the party by either interlinking with the Seraph and then canceling the interlink immediately, which will share the buffs from both characters that interlink to each other, and then having one character be the Seraph to pass the Awakening to the other, and the other being able to pass the buff to the rest of the party. The other, easier way is to have this buff passer use the Deflector Field Talent art to give Awakening to the rest of the party, but this of course is at the cost of a useful talent art from that character. Keep in mind to look for ways that can easily pass Awakening when building your team. The last goal of a support class is giving art recharge to the rest of the party. The main ways to do this is to boost art recharge speed or refresh all of the arts in the party through a powerful talent art. For recharge speed up, there's the accessories and skills of Protector's Pride as discussed before, the recharge up buff from Soul Hacker, the Awakening buff, as well as a recharge speed up field effect, which can be used by the Keves support classes and the Troubadour class. This field is another 20% art recharge, so using all of these together, it is possible to reach over 2.5 times art recharge speed while doing this. The art refresh effects comes from the talent art Glittering Melody, and it is one of the strongest arts in the entire game. It will fully refresh all allies' arts and pause their buff duration as well for 20 seconds, allowing them to last much longer. This is a very strong effect and a big part of many meta comps. Its main issue is that it requires 9 points of talent art gauge to recharge. Often, a build is specifically set up to be what is called a talent art battery, where its goal is to get off as many Glittering Melodies as possible and as quickly as possible. Because laying a field effect down gives 1 point of talent art recharge, a setup can be used to lay down 2 field effects at once with a fusion art, granting 2 points. If this support has at least 125% of bonus art recharge effects, this can be gotten up to 2.5 points per fusion, making the support able to lay down 2 of these dual field fusion effects and instantly get a Glittering Melody fully charged, at least on normal difficulty. Next, let's look at how to build these support classes. As for skills, one of the most important ones to always use is the All About Support skill. This will allow an additional field to be placed down, which allows for a maximum of 2. More fields is the most effective way to build the talent gauge on these support classes, so having more fields will be able to increase the uptime of these talent arts. Protector's Pride is another important one, as this additional art recharge can also help charge these talent arts more quickly. Of course, this requires a non-defender build as usual. Swift Song or other party-wide buff effects are usually good to run in supports as they have the least important skill slots generally. So you can use Swift Song or any of the other party buff effects in this slot. There's also the Strengthening Gambit. This will increase buff effect duration by 50%. The main reason to use this is if you're generating buffs or you're using the Glittering Melody talent art, as this will also increase the length of the pause buff that the talent art can generate. Keepable Hands, another talent art based skill, and this one will fully charge the talent art at the start of battle. This one is very useful if you're running a Glittering Melody user, as it can get a Glittering Melody off immediately at the start of battle instead of having to wait to charge it up fully for the first time. And the last slot is usually another flex slot. Moving on to accessories, there are a few notable ones you're going to want to look for. Again, Fraternal Badge, more art recharge is better, so if you're not running defenders, you might as well run this. The Gust Bracelet. Now this may seem a little bit redundant if you're using Glittering Melody, as the Glittering Melody will fully charge up everyone's talent art immediately anyways, but there is the benefit of, for specifically the Soul Hacker builds that want to get their buffs off immediately and as quickly as possible, and this is just an easy way to do that consistently. The Crystal Earrings will slightly fill the chain attack gauge on art execution. This one isn't all that relevant, but if you're running nothing else, you might as well use this one. As for more healing-oriented ones, there's the Solace Rings. This will boost the healing by 40%, Generally, if you have a healing art on one of your support classes, you're just going to want to use the Soulless Rings to maximize your burst healing potential. The Shield Belt. This is normally a defender accessory, but you're not dealing damage anyways as a support class, so you might as well take the 30% damage reduction, and the less damage doesn't really matter. The Prayer Necklace is quite powerful as alongside a Revive based build, as you can then give the Revive party member also Armor Veil, which Armor Veil is at base 20% of the character's max health, so it'll be another way to increase their survivability right after being revived. Gems aren't quite as easy as they are for attacker and defender classes, but there are still a few notable ones you want to look for. Notably, there is the Soothing Breath gem and the Life-Saving Expertise. Both of these will increase the revive ability. I've discussed these before, but this one will make the revive 45% faster, and this one will revive them with 45% more health. As for the other two gems that you're going to run, is the Swelling Blessing and Refined Blessing. This will boost the power of the buff effects by 50%. This one is very important in all buff-based classes, and Refined Blessing will increase their duration. This is usually for Glittering Melodies again. So generally you're going to want to run 3 of these 4 gems on a support class, depending on the scenario and what specifically the build wants to accomplish. And lastly, let's look at Master Arts that these can use. As for the Agnes Master Arts, you're going to want to run that additional field effect, which the best one is the Ring of Roses. This will be the field effect that grants 20% additional art recharge, which is always good. And then these 2 buffs are going to be from the Signifer, and these are very powerful, as this is Oriole, which is where the random buffs can be generated from. You can also run Aquamine in this slot as well if you don't need the random buffs, but this one is also fine to use. Resonant Flag. This one is very important, as this one will be able to pass the buffs to the rest of the party from when they've been just revived, or to repass power charges, and so forth. As for the Kevis Master Arts, these usually aren't nearly as strong. You have the Advanced Cooldown Field Effect. This is for 15% damage reduction, which is not bad. You've got Multi-Blast. This one is unfortunately not that useful, as this is what I'd call one of the trickle heal arts, as it's only 100% of healing power, which is fairly low, and it's on a fairly long cooldown, and the damage doesn't matter. But regardless, there isn't much else to run alternatively. And then the last one is a flex slot again. Usually you can run like combo arts in this spot, so Shield Bash, Soaring Tempest, maybe an evasion art. It doesn't really matter. Same for Multi-Blast, you could also put more combos in this spot. As for Talon arts, there is of course Glittering Melody. Now this one is usually what you're going to run on most of your supports, because your tool field effects and the art recharge is the best way to get this up. And this one will fully refresh the arts and pause the debuffs as discussed before. The other buff you can run is Deflector Field. Now, Deflector Field is the other awakening source other than Seraph. However, Deflector Field does have some problems, especially on support classes. Namely, Deflector Field requires you to take damage to actually get the awakening buff. Just using the art isn't enough. So, you have to wait and time this until an AoE effect is coming off, or if the healer somehow manages to take aggro, which is unlikely. So you're going to want to be player controlled for getting the Deflector Field down initially, and then using Glittering Melody pause buffs to keep the awakening buff for the entire rest of the fight. And assuming you have enough Glittering Melodies, you can consistently keep the buff permanently paused. And that is it for the main 3 roles that you want in a party. Before we move into the spoiler section, there are a few extra tips I would like to share. For team composition building, generally there's specific roles you want to add. I like to have 1 to 2 breakers, the breaker being an ogre usually for its most consistent breaking, or a specific player controlled setup that could also work. I like to use 1 dedicated buffer. The best for this role is going to be a soul hacker, but a Signifer or a Kevis healer that uses Oriole also can do this. 1 Resonant Flag user. Again, the Resonant Flags are going to be the Signifer or the Kevis healers for the most part, but occasionally a Kevis defender or a Yumsmith could work if you also want to consistently pass Awakening. 1 to 2 talent batteries. This is done with dual field healer classes that use 2 fields at once and significant art recharge, or the Seraph class that uses the Quick Draw and Flame Lord fusion. I also like to use 1 to 2 primary damage dealers. The best way to deal damage commonly is through the smash combo, but there are other options that will be shown soon. Finally, I like to have 0 to 1 tanks, and commonly it's going to be a phase tank if you want it to be an AI controlled, an evasion art spam if you want it to be player control, And this tank doesn't necessarily have to be a defender as well. There are other roles that can function as a tank through damage reduction strategies. Additionally, for a few other things, interlinking. Interlinking usually is a reduction in damage and not that useful for the most part. However, it can get you out of pinches as you don't take damage while interlinked for temporarily. However, the AI players will still interlink when you don't want them to, and this can be annoying, so what you can do is you can go into game settings and set the interlink type to player control rather than party control. For hero selection, usually it's going to be a small damage contribution, so I like to go for extra support effects they can do. So extra combo arts, Fiona if you want to use buffs, the Troubadour hero for extra art recharge through Glittering Melody and a Troubadour skill. Otherwise, you just want to use a general healer for the extra healing capabilities. There are some heroes that are specifically for chain attacks, but I'll go into those later in a chain attack guide. And that wraps it up for the first part of this video. Next up is going to be the spoiler section, so I'm going to give you time to leave if you don't want to be spoiled. Man, I can't believe Wamba was the real Xenoblade the whole time. Alright, and now for part 2. In part 2, I'm going to go over a general tier list of where I believe all the classes are currently situated and the current optimal combat strategies, and then go over each class individually and showcase the optimal builds for each one. Now for the tier list, I'll start at the top and move my way down, explaining the position of each class. So in the top S+ tier, it is going to be Soul Hacker and Seraph. Soul Hacker I already explained, but it's got the most powerful buffs in the game, as well as being more versatile than just being a support, having incredibly high damage output as well, with alright damage outside of chain attacks, but inside chain attacks it's also very high. Seraph is that high because it can do everything, and I mean everything. It's an incredibly powerful damage dealer, it's a Glittering Melody battery, it can generate the Awakening buff, it can combo enemies incredibly well, it can tank and get to 100% damage reduction. It can do pretty much anything you want it to. Moving on to the tier below that, S tier. So at the top of S tier, it's going to be Ogre. Ogre has one claim to fame, and that is its skill Fury Smash. Fury Smash will increase reactions by 45%, and therefore allow it to break the most consistently out of any class in the game. And because break is the start of every single combo, you're going to want to have a way to break the enemies. And Ogre is the best breaker, therefore it's an incredibly strong class to use. War Medic and Medic Gunner fall within the same sort of niche, which is that they are Keva's healers with powerful healing options, powerful revive options, and can use the Resonant Flag and Oriole Mastered arts, which allow them to generate buffs very well on top of their fields, reviving, and healing capabilities. Sword Fighter. Sword Fighter is one of the highest out-of-chain attack damage options in the game because it has incredibly easy to activate additives, high power arts, including Air Slash, one of the highest damage arts in the game, and because it's a Keva's class, it gains access to the Mighty Beat Master art, so therefore it can also smash incredibly well. In fact, Sword Fighter is probably the best smasher in the entire game. And because Smash is incredibly powerful, so is Sword Fighter. A tier is where a lot of classes in this game are situated, starting with Incursor. Incursor is also a powerful damage dealer with good ratio arts, and its main claim to fame is its incredibly high critical hit rate and ways to stack up its damage from those critical hits. It is a consistent way to do this damage, and therefore it's a solid all-around damage output. Life Sage. Life Sage is the strongest healing capabilities in the game. That's it. It's very good at it, and therefore it can keep you alive very well. Being an agonist class, it doesn't really get any incredibly powerful fields or Resonant Flag, but it's still a very powerful support option. Then we have Flash Fencer. Flash Fencer also has a pretty solid crit rate, and it's a Keva's class doing solid damage. It feels a bit like a mix of Incursor and Sword Fighter in terms of strengths, but a little bit weaker than both of them. It can still smash, so it's pretty high up there anyways. Full Metal Jaguar is a very good class. Being an ether attacker, it has some problems as it doesn't get the main benefits from Ultimate Qigong like the physical attackers can do, but it also has high hit count arts and Quick Draw, which is an evasion art, which allows it to become an evasion tank as well, using its evasion arts, Jackal Claw, Aerial Slash, and Quick Draw, and being able to dodge most attacks. It's not too effective as an ether attacker, but it can still work. Martial Artist is very simple. Leave no button unpressed. Martial artists can just spam arts to its heart content without really any problems with art recharge or uptime. You just see an attack, you push it, and it has pretty solid damage output options for that. It's just an overall solid damage attacker. Lone Exile is also an evasion tank, like Full Metal Jaguar, but Full Metal Jaguar has the advantage of being an attacker class, meaning that can still tank and take aggro while not turning off Fraternal Badges and Protector's Pride. But overall, Lone Exile has the additional advantage of being able to effectively use Deflector Field and Resonant Flag, so it's a pretty solid source of awakening on top of being a good tank. Troubadour. Troubadour is very good at art recharge, having access to both Ring of Roses and Glittering Melody. However, it doesn't really have that many powerful buffing or healing options on top of that. There is one setup you can use where the Troubadour dying also recharges everyone's art, so you could set up a character to die as many times as possible, but that's a little bit more of a joke strategy than anything else. Moving on to B tier. B tier classes are still usable, although they're usually stronger options that you can use, but they do have strengths of their own. Yumsmith in particular has very powerful support effects, being able to use Resonant Flag and its incredibly powerful crit rate upfield, as well as having a solid stance and damage output arts. Overall, it can do quite a few things, just none of them particularly well outside of its field, but it can fill pretty much any role you need it to. Signifer was once considered to be one of the strongest classes in the game, but as time went on it turns out that Signifer is not the best random buffer, nor the best buffer in general. But it is still fairly strong, as the random buffs still can be valuable. However, it is outdone by both War Medic and Medic Gunner, but it still is effective as well. Machine Assassin was once considered to be a completely terrible, worthless class, but there have been some developments to make it slightly better than that, what it was once believed to be. Notably, its job is to inflict debuffs and be a pretty powerful attacker against debuffed enemies. While debuffs are still inconsistent, there are ways to make them work better than expected, like with Shackle Ring or using Tyon's or Ouroboros form to first stack the debuffs. As well as, it can just do solid damage output with fast recharge, being able to smash, and high ratio arts overall, making it a solid choice, even if not the best one. Heavy Guard. Heavy Guard is pretty good, having high ratio arts, decent attack stats, and pretty solid animations, as well as being a Kevas attacker, allowing it to effectively use Deflector Field and Resonant Flag to pass the buffs. Overall, it's a solid phase tank, but of course, its problem is that it's a defender, so it makes Protector's Pride and Fraternal Badge not work. Royal Summoner. Royal Summoner is in a little bit of a weird place. While it has a lot of things going for it, notably a up to 400% additive, an incredibly strong talent art, being able to generate powerful buffs, but at the same time, it's not very good at any of those things. It just has, its arts are slow, kind of long cooldowns, and it's just a little bit of a janky class in general, but it is possible to make it work, but oftentimes you can use its powerful arts and skills and just transfer them to better, more suitable classes. And then at the very bottom of B is Nipponic Champion. Now, Nipponic Champion is intended to be an agility tank, and of course agility tanks are not very good, but Nipponic Champion does have one thing going for it, that being a omnidirectional break. It's a break effect that doesn't need to be positioned from the side for it to work. Therefore, you can also fuse it to shield bash the topple art, allowing for an easy break topple fusion. Now, normally these enemies have high enough break resist that this is inconsistent, however, it does have very good use in challenge mode, where it doesn't really matter the break resist of the enemy. So overall, it has a small niche, and it keeps it out of C tier for that alone. In C tier, however, we first have Strategos. Strategos is an alright healer that's attempting to use debuffs and healing effects at the same time. It can also buff a little bit as well. The key problem being, none of those things are really all that useful, keeping Strategos pretty low on the tier list. The second face tank defender we have is Lost Vanguard. Now, Lost Vanguard is similar to Heavy Guard in the sense that it attempts to reduce damage through damage reduction skills. The problem being is it has generally worse arts overall than Heavy Guard, as well as being an Agnes class, meaning it can't use Deflector Field and Resonant Flag very well. Therefore, it's just generally strictly worse than Heavy Guard in most scenarios. And then at the very bottom of C tier, we have Zephyr. Zephyr is an okay class for most of the main story, being able to be an effective agility tank with alright damage output as well. The problem being is that agility tanking ends up being very bad against super bosses due to their incredibly high dexterity stat, meaning it doesn't really have anything going for it like the break art that Nipponic Champion does, so it sits at the bottom of C, not really having a niche and outclassed by the enemies it goes up against. And then we come to D tier. D tier are really the only classes that I would strictly advise attempting to avoid most of the time. At the top of D we have Stalker. Stalker is in a similar place to Machine Assassin, except the Stalker has a few other problems. Notably, its arts are way slower than Machine Assassins, meaning they're generally worse, and that it's an ether attacker, so it doesn't have access to ultimate Qigong like Machine Assassin has. Therefore, it ends up being very poor in most scenarios and probably the worst damage dealer in the entire game. We also have Guardian Commander. Now, Guardian Commander is attempting to be a phase tank like Lost Vanguard and Heavy Guard, however, it is unfortunately worse in both, and its arts and ratios are even worse than Lost Vanguard, meaning that it has a very hard time holding aggro, and therefore if it can't hold aggro, it just holds the team back most of the time. Thaumaturge tries to be a split between both an attacker and a healer, and unfortunately it does neither of those things very well, as the healing aspect is usually the trickle heals, which aren't that useful, and its damage dealing is relatively low due to its poor stats, even though its arts are okay. As well, it does have access to ultimate Qigong though, which is about the only thing it has going for it. It just can't do damage, it can't heal, it can't buff, it doesn't really do a whole lot overall. And the very worst class in the game is unfortunately the Tactician class. Now, Tactician is similar to Thaumaturge problems, where it has pretty poor healing, but it also attempts to give out debuffs, which debuffs aren't that useful, healing isn't that useful, therefore it has exactly one use, and that is its evasion field, which is only useful when you're going for evasion stacking, which is only good on the already mid-tiers classes of Nipponic Champion and Zephyr. Therefore, it only makes bad classes slightly better, but contributes nothing else beyond that, making it unfortunately the worst class in the game in my opinion. Alright, apparently I was way too slow on the uptake for getting this video done, because in the meantime we have gotten a new update, 1.3. And in this update we got two significant things. We've gotten a new class, the Lapidarist, and we've gotten some new accessories as well. The new class Lapidarist is an interesting one, because it's a Kevas healer, which, you know, both Kevas healers of Warp Medic and Medigun are very strong, and Lapidarist seems promising at the same time. Lapidarist also has access to what I think might be the new strongest skill in the entire game, Beaming Edge, which would boost the entire party's crit rate by 20% and additional 50 percentage points of critical hit power, which is incredibly powerful, as well as Lapidarist's super fast animations at a high crit rate, letting you generate random buffs very quickly. So Lapidarist seems to be very strong, although maybe not as powerful and consistent as the other two, but still definitely a very good healer, probably at the top of A tier at least. The new accessories are also very interesting because they're essentially upgraded versions of currently existing accessories that allow you to add extra traits on top. And these extra traits range from worthless to incredibly powerful. The best ones being increases to the critical hit rate, which is additive percentage points. This essentially allows classes to get way higher critical hit rates than they were ever hitting before, meaning that some classes, like Incursor, lose some of their value, and some classes with low crit rate, like the Full Metal Jaguar, become even stronger. So overall, this is a very strong buff to a lot of classes, especially with the new crit power making crits very important. So this is officially a crit-oriented metagame, I'd say, at this point. Next up, let's look at these specific builds now that we have an idea of the tier list. I'm not going to showcase all of these because this video is going on long enough as is, but I will show the build, generally what you want to do with them. So first of all, let's move at the top of the tier list and move the way down. So at the very top of the tier list, we of course have the Soul Hacker class. Now this is the buff Soul Hacker build here, one of the strongest builds in the entire game, if not the strongest. And the end goal of the buff Soul Hacker here is using a fusion art between Battle Pheromone and Desperate Charge to give out 4 different buffs at the same time. We'll also have an additional buffs from Dragon Decree and Butterfly Dust. Then Life Plant and Cavalry are both flex slots. You can put a number of different arts here. Normally Soul Hacker Talent art isn't very good, so I just put Infinity Blade here as a filler. For skills, you're going to want Strength Support for the additional 35% buff power, so Soul Hacker has the strongest buffs in the game. Large Scale Shock to make sure that the entire party is hit by the buffs, because sometimes the area of effect of them is a little bit small. Systematic Defense for extra recharge. It's 60%, so you might as well run it. As for gems, we've got, of course, Refine and Swelling Blessing to increase the duration and power of the buffs even further, and then Soothing Breath just for some revive health up. Accessories, I've got Shield Belt just for taking less damage to increase survivability of the class. I can maybe get an extra revive or two off if there's a massive attack from an enemy. Solace Rings for healing power. This is only if you're going to run the life plant, otherwise you can put something else here. And Gust Bracelet just because I like to start off the fight with the fusion buff, so I don't want to have to wait for him to get recharged first. That's it for buff Soul Hacker. Then we have a more damaging style Soul Hacker, so this one is similar, but this one's aiming for damage, so we've still got the buffs here just because they're that powerful, even on a damage dealer, you want them. Aqua Ball is a very high ratio damage art with a really strong additive to it. And then Wild Wave and Transient Bond is a very strong fusion art here because they both have massive ratios of 660 and 500. You can run Elimination Beam over Transient Bond, but Transient Bond has the benefit of being able to also be canceled to itself very consistently because it has crit recharge on it. Again, just Final Countdown. Dominion Flower isn't that useful. Doesn't really matter either way from there. Skills. Underworld Rage. This is if 2 party members die, you will get an additive of 200%, which is, of course, very large, very good to have. Supercharge. This will boost the damage dealt for each art that's currently recharged as an independent multiplier. And it's very good if you recharge all your arts while going into a chain attack, and this is almost double damage if all of your arts are recharged when you first start. Dangerous Claws, this will increase your crit rate and crit damage, so it's always nice to have to increase that crit rate to a pretty high amount. Gems, we're going to use Empowered Combo, Analyze Weakness, and Swelling Blessing. These two, of course, for the damage, and Swelling Blessing because you want those increased buff power. Refined Blessing, of course, the other spot, but generally, you know, this is damage build, so you're going to want to keep these two. Accessories, we're going to Thermo Headgear to increase that crit rate. I'm not going to use really the custom crafted accessories in this one because those things are hard to come by and usually a pretty straightforward upgrade if you do manage to get a hold of them. But we got the Thermo Headgear to increase that crit rate further. Lunar Ring, just a simple additive. You could run any additive here. There's plenty of ways to get more than 100 even. And it's Eternity Rings for the further attack increase. Oh, and I guess this one's a Power Soul and this one's a Heal Soul. Doesn't really matter. Then we also have the Seraphs. This is the damage dealing Seraph variant, the Chakra Ring Element Genesis. So the end goal of this class setup is going to be using a Flame Lord's Quick Draw Fusion to instantly get your Element Genesis charged, and then use the rest of your arts alongside a Chakra Ring to get your Element Genesis to do a ton of damage. So you'll summon the elements, Leveling Fire for that additive, get Awakening off, Inferno Dance to high ratio art, Cross Impact to Power Charge lastly, and then you can use a massive damage Element Genesis. For skills, you're of course going to want Ultimate Qigong for the damage boost, and then Eye for weak points for the higher crit rate. You can run Cypher Edge here, they're pretty interchangeable, but Eye will give you the larger increase. Critical Strike, of course, for additional critical damage. It's pretty useful to have most of the time. Gems, of course, we're just running the stock here, Empowered Combo, Analyze Weakness, Steel Cleaver. I guess over Steel Cleaver you could always run Dispersed Bloodlust, but you're doing so much damage that at this point you're going to take aggro, even only taking 45% aggro. Accessories, we've got, of course, the Chakra Ring. So the Chakra Ring is actually bugged, so the legendary ones and rare ones are actually worse than the common, but I don't have any commons on me at the moment, so just use whatever Chakra Ring you have. It's a pretty small difference regardless, but common's slightly better. Thermo Headgear for the further crit rate, and Eternity Rings for the further attack. Pretty straightforward. The other Seraph build you can go for, this one's in a more supporting role. This one I like to call the Battery Seraph. It can do like damage reduction and use Glittering Melody a lot. So this one is still using the core engine of Flame Lord Quick Draw to get massive Talon Art recharge. And then, of course, this time the Talon Art is Glittering Melody instead. Crimson Lance Soaring Tempest for a very useful, just instant launch from a break, so it's nice to have for combos. Dragon Snarl, it's just a filler art for damage, doesn't really matter. You could technically run Inferno Dance too. Dragon Snarl technically has a little bit more Glittering Melody charge, so if you're going for Talon Art here, you can get that instead. Solid Stance, this is for damage reduction. This is the other thing Seraph wants to do because it can get the 25% damage reduction from Awakening, 25% from the Solid Stance, and then from other sources get up to 100% pretty easily. Skills, we've got Protector's Pride to get that extra recharge because we really want that Glittering Melody to get charged as fast as possible, so this will make it much easier to do that. Positioning Pro, we're just running a lot of positional arts on this one because, you know, we got Crimson Lance, Flame Lord Quick Draw, so we need that Positioning Pro. And then Ultimate Qigong, of course, might as well run it. I mean, it's free damage even on a class that isn't solely focused on damage. Gems, Endless Weakness Powered combo, pretty straightforward. And then Refined Blessing for the increased duration of the buff, because you're going to be using those Glittering Melodies a lot, so you want those Glittering Melodies to last as long as possible. Accessories, we've got the Platinum Belt and Tyrant Ring to increase the topple and launch duration. This will just allow for the enemy to be launched for longer, allowing for smash damage to be even higher, and just giving you more time that the enemy is unable to do anything. And then more art recharge for Eternal Badge. Next up, we've got the Ogres. So this Ogre build is what I'll call like the standard Breaker Ogre. This one, you're going to start off the fight usually with the fusion of Hammerhead Flashback, and then I like to do like a Glittering Melody immediately afterwards, but then of course you have the other combo arts here. The main goal is using this Flashback to fuse it. It's with the Hammerhead, so the AI prioritizes moving to the side more. Cannonball Giant Swing, these are both filler arts, doesn't really matter. I don't really like Maximum Voltage because the Ogre AI likes to use it pretty frequently, and it doesn't do a whole lot. In terms of skills, we've got Strengthening Gambit for the longer Glittering Melody duration, Capable Hands to be able to Glittering Melody at the start of the fight as well after landing the break, and then Protector's Pride for the extra recharge. You could also run like a party buff skill here, Beaming Edge, Essence of Ether, Abundant Ocean was one of those things. Their Ogres are pretty flexible in terms of their skill slots. In fact, if you're running 2 of these, I like to just only have 1 Capable Hands so that then I can put a buff on the other one or something. In terms of gems aren't really that important on Ogre. You got Refined Blessing, of course, to get that Glittering Melody to 100% extra duration, which is the maximum, so you're just going to have 40-second Glittering Melodies, which is very nice to have. These are pretty much just filler. Ironclad, Accurate Grace. This class doesn't do enough damage to even make Dispersed Bloodlust worth it in the first place, so a little bit of extra dexterity, a little bit extra health doesn't really matter. Accessories, of course, we got the Accomplished Van Braces to lower the break resistance of the enemy so that we can get those breaks even more consistently. In fact, with a Accomplished Van Brace plus Fury Smash, you can get up to like 70, 80, 90% break chance on pretty much anything. Gust Bracelet, this is just so that when I can start the fight with that break art so I don't have to wait to get that all recharged. Usually I only run one on my Ogre. I put the Gust Bracelet and the Capable Hands Glittering Melody on the same one. Platinum Belt is just for extra topple duration. Doesn't really matter that much. You can run another flex slot here, maybe more art recharge or something, but it's just useful for keeping the enemy toppled longer. This is the second Ogre setup you can do. This one's more like a player-controlled one. This is a Shackle Ring Ogre. So this one, the end goal is keeping the enemy launched for an absurd amount of time. So the way you're going to do that is you're going to start with your 3 primary arts here. You're going to go just do these 3 in any order. Then you're going to do a flashback, which is going to have a super high break chance, essentially guaranteed on pretty much everything. Shield Bash, of course, to topple them afterwards, and then Soaring Tempest to launch. And because you're doing it in this order, the 6th art will be the Soaring Tempest, so you'll have a huge 1.8x increase to the launch time, a 1.55 on that Shield Bash. So the enemy's going to be launched for a very long time. You can also forego one of these 3 arts and just go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then Saber Strike for the 6th talent art to smash it, but oftentimes this is only if you don't have like a dedicated smasher in your team, because this usually won't quite damage cap with this setup. Skills. This one's another Capable Hands Glittering Melody. Oh wait, no, this is Capable Hands Saber Strike. I guess this is for damage build if you wanted to go that. This one you can swap it out, whatever you want. Universal Annihilation for more damage, Ultimate Qigong for more damage, but again, these are pretty flexible here. You could run a Protector's Pride or something. Skills aren't too important on Ogres again. Gems. Analyze Weakness Powered combo, might as well. And Disperse Bloodlust. This one, again, you can swap it for whatever you want. This one's going to be doing a little bit more damage, so. But again, you can put Ironclad, Steel Cleaver. Really doesn't matter that much. The main goal of this one is just keeping the enemy launched for a very long time by using the Shackle Ring. Of course, a Break Brooch to make those breaks nearly guaranteed, and a Chaotic Memory against those high evasion super bosses. This was a very good way to, especially against like Ryoho and Seratenia, who have super high evasion stats that it's very hard to hit them a lot. You can use the Chaotic Memory to guarantee the break, topple, and launch, and then once the enemy's toppled, all attacks will hit it guaranteed, so you don't have to worry about evasion that much. Alright, those are it for those 3 builds. Moving on. We got a War Medic. We got the 3 main healers. These are all very similar. They're all Keva's healers, and they all play a very similar role, just with slight differences between them, depending on what cop you want to use. Starting off with War Medic, we've got Heal Bullet and Resonant Flag for the buff passing. We got Vital Bullet and Advanced Cooldown for the field. Vital Bullet doesn't matter that much usually. I just don't run Multi-Blast because that will make you blow the power charge, and you don't want to lose the power charge in this class. Ring of Roses and Aquamind. Again, just pretty solid for healing, art recharge, and whatnot. Glittery Melody. This one will get charged by placing down field effects, which is why I'm running 2 fields, so that you can get those Glittery Melodies up longer, more frequently. This is where I'm running most of my party buff skills, so we get the All About Support to run that extra field effect, and then an Essence of Ether and Beaming Edge for the massive party buff skills. Beaming Edge is definitely the priority here. Gems. I'm not running any buffs that matter about their power, because passing the buffs keep their original power, so it doesn't matter that much that I'm not running the other buff power one instead, so I'm just running the buff duration. Soothing Breath and Life-Saving Expertise, these are just for revives, and because the skill here we've got Rescue License for 40% plus the healing up from this one, you can pretty much revive the ally at full health, which is very helpful. In terms of accessories, doesn't matter that much. Solace Rings for the extra healing power, nice to have. Fraternal Badge for the extra recharge, keep those Glittery Melodies up, keep those healing arts more. And Immaculate Necklace, this is kind of just a filler art. You can put like Shield Belt there instead or something if you want the extra survivability. In fact, it might be better because this class will be your best reviver on the team. Medic Gunner is very similar. Again, you have a very similar sort of art palettes here. You got your main field, you got a healing art, you got the same 3 master arts, you got the Glittery Melody. This one just runs Power Ring for the additive damage field effect instead of damage reduction field, and then Vortex. Because Vortex is an attacking art, this class can technically lose power charge every time it uses this art, so I don't think it's quite as good as War Medic in that regard, but it's still certainly serviceable, and the extra additive damage is sometimes certainly helpful. In terms of skills, exact same thing. You're running that extra field effect, and then your party buff skills. Gems, same exact thing. The revives and buff duration. Accessories, pretty similar. Prayer Necklace, because you're going to be reviving very fast with this class that are reviving at full health, so a little bit extra armor veil health is pretty nice. Solace Rings for Eternal Badge, same as before. We got Lapidaris, the new class. This one's interesting because this one has a very high crit rate and very fast ratio arts. So you've got Rigid Slicer and Blessed Edge, which are both very, very fast animations, pretty solid hit count, which means that you can do some interesting stuff with them. Another field effect, this one's Arts Heal. It's not that useful, but might as well run it for more Glittery Melody recharge. And then again, same arts here. Actually, instead of Aquamind, I'm running Oriel here for buff stacking, because this class can do it very fast, because they can cancel a lot. In terms of skills, I'm running Frenzied Combo. So now this is the interesting one, because you can use that Frenzied Combo to recharge your very fast high hit count arts to cancel a ton and get a ton of Oriels off very quickly. And then again, party buffs, Essence of Ether, and you don't actually need Beaming Edge because of course this class has the Beaming Edge already, so you can run the Essence of Ether here. All about support, more field effects, plus you can run a 4th field with this class as well. In terms of gems, this time we are running Swelling Blessing actually, because, you know, we're using Oriel to generate the buffs, and then more Revive gems. You could technically run buff duration over one of these gems, but generally you can get enough buff duration from how frequently you're going to be Glittery Melodying with this class. Accessories, we've got Mercury Rings for the additive crit rate here, Solace Rings for the healing power, and then this one, I know I said I wasn't going to use one of these, but this is an exception here because this will give you 9 additive crit rate, which is enough to get it to 65%, essentially making it nearly 100% once all the buffs are active and whatnot. Plus, it's 55% extra recharge, a little bit better than a Fraternal Badge actually. So, like, these crafted accessories are very good. This one is kind of hard to get, but if you manage to get them, they're definitely significant upgrades. Then we've got Sword Fighter. So Sword Fighter has pretty much one job, and it's going to be Smash. The way you do that is you do an Air/Mighty Beat fusion. Air/ has a cancel for independent multiplier, very high ratio, and then Mighty Beat is of course the smash dart, so you're going to do a ton of smash damages with this art alone. The rest of these are kind of all filler. You got evasion arts, might as well run those, and then Ground B is a long animation, Sword Strike, so it can sometimes break, but usually not the consistent. Saber Strike is like a backup smash, but that's not going to be all that frequently happening. For skills, we've got Ultimate Qigong, damage increase, or Universal Annihilation, damage increase, Critical Strike, damage increase. This class wants the damage cap smash, and it's going to do as much as possible to make sure it happens. Again, for gems, we got damage increase, damage increase, damage increase. This class is all about the damage. Security Rings, we got the extra attack stat. Thermo Headgear, we got the extra critical rate. And Hermit Mask, we got more additive damage. This class wants that damage. Normally you're going to run the Sword Fighter and Noah because his upgraded weapon will give him the better crit rate and attack stat, but oftentimes this class is damage capping anyways, so not too much of a concern. Again, this class is another one that really benefits from those crafted accessories because you can replace that Hermit Mask. Actually, that should be a fiber wrap, shouldn't it? Yeah, high fiber wrap is slightly higher. And there's again a crafted fiber wraps that does a similar effect here, like this one. I've got 13 additive crit rate here, 11 additive crit rate plus 105% more additive damage, so this would technically be better. That's Sword Fighter, just use that canceled air / mighty beat, damage cap. And Cursor, this class is an interesting one because this one's another damage dealer that isn't focused on smash or talent art damage. It's just, its primary arts are very powerful, so it can do a ton of damage that way. So this class is very high crit rate, so you're going to use Aerial Slash for that high ratio and evasion, fuse the Hidden Thorn for a massive ratio. This is 840 ratio between the two, very powerful. Quick Draw, because it's bugged, has essentially a 540 ratio and gives you 2 points of talent charge, which is actually exactly enough to charge up the Raging Force here. So you can just use a Fuse Quick Draw, immediately have the Raging Force up, which then you can use to do a ton of damage. This is a very high damage talent art. Versal Edge for extra crit rate to increase that additive damage more. And then Mystic Vision for added more crit rate and crit power. Cross Impact, you can power charge before the Raging Force, but they're in the same damage group, so you won't get a massive benefit from it, but still nice to have. You can also Cross Impact into this fusion here. Skills, we got Critical Strike, of course. You want this because this class is critting pretty much constantly. Ultimate Qigong for more physical damage because of the arts of physical. And Frenzied Combo because you're going to be running a lot of crits, so you can art spam better. So on crit-based classes that have very fast animations, Frenzied Combo is very good. Same with Lapidarist. Gems, you got Analyze Weakness and Empowered Combo for more damage, and Disperse Bloodlust because this class will be doing damage, but it won't be using smashes, so it may actually be a benefit from aggro reduction more than, a little bit of extra attack. Accessories, we've got Saturni Rings for the attack increase, of course, Hermit Mask for more additive, and Fraternal Badge for extra recharge. You can also put more damage in place of Fraternal Badge if you think you have enough Clarity Melodies. And we've got Life Sage. This is another healing class. This is the best Agnes healer, but I still think it's much worse than using just a simple Kavesi healer. So in terms of arts, you're going to be using Saber Slash, Vivid Carve. This one's just for buff removal, not that useful. Multi-Blast. Again, healer arts for Agnes healers aren't that very good, so you're just kind of stuck with whatever you got. These three, pretty much. Redemption's a very high ratio healing art, very useful. Aquamind for regen, very high regen to the party, and some extra recharge speed. Saber Slash for some more healing, and of course, Glittery Melody. Skills, we've got Party Buffs here, and Protector's Pride. Pretty straightforward. Gems, we've got Revive Gems and Buff Duration, just the standard for most healers. And accessories, we've got, I ran out of Solace Rings, but you can just use another healing up. Prayer Necklace for more revives, Fraternal Badge for more art recharge. Alright, moving on again. We have Flash Fencer. So Flash Fencer is again this is a smash oriented because it's Kevin's attacker, so it can be pretty effective at doing that. So for its art, we've got Hidden Thorn, Mighty Beat Fusion. Hidden Thorn's, very high ratio, Mighty Beat, of course, Smash, so this is going to do a lot of damage to Smash. In fact, you can probably damage cap pretty easily. Null Slash, Jackal Claw, these are both. Null Slash, pretty fast art, same with Jackal Claw, so you can do pretty good cancels here. Same thing with Cross Impact, Aerial Slash, so you're going to be doing evasions and dodging attacks until you can get that Hidden Thorn Mighty Beat charged up to Smash. Saber Strike is a backup Smash as well. In terms of skills, we've got Qigong for the smash damage, Cypher Edge with a slightly higher crit rate. Cypher Edge is enough in this case, you don't actually need Eye for weak points to reach that 100%. Frenzied Combo for the recharge, because you're using a lot of Null Slash Cross Impact for good recharge. Gems, we've got Analyze Weakness and Powered Combo for damage, and Swelling Blessing to increase the power of the power charge that you can give to yourself with the Cross Impact. Accessories, Thermo Headgear for the crit rate, the Turning Rings for the attack, Hermit Mask for the additive damage. You're starting to be able to see all the common trends here. Full Metal Jaguar. This is another interesting class because this class functions best as a tank. So you're going to be using Quick Draw, Jackal Claw, and Aerial / Fusions to essentially always have the evasion up at all times. So you're going to be dodging attacks pretty effectively this way. And then we've got Deflector Field as a talent art because you can get Awakening this way for extra recharge. Then for skills, we've got Eye for Weak Points to get that critical rate very high because Full Metal Jaguars have very low crit rate normally. Frenzied Combo for the recharge because of all the high hit count arts that are also, can crit and therefore recharge very quickly. And Protector's Pride for our recharge because this class is going to want to take the aggro, so it's essentially free recharge. Gems, we've got the standard empowered combo analyzed in a Steel Cleaver. You're going to want to do as much damage as possible to draw aggro. You could use Brimming Spirit or something to generate more aggro over Steel Cleaver, but you should have enough aggro generation as is. Accessories, Security Rings Thermo Headgear for maximum crit rate. And then again, this is that 9 additive crit rate with the 55% extra recharge on an accessory. This is very nice to have, but again, you can also just put Fraternal Badge instead. We've got Martial Artist. Martial Artist is very good at just spamming arts as quickly as possible, so you got very fast ratios. You got Jackal Claw, Quick Draw again for evasion on these things, Disruptive Charge, and Thorn for good ratio, and then Impulse Wave. You're actually going to be running an Element Genesis setup here because you can do a Summon an Element and Element Genesis, so that's pretty powerful there. For skills, you're going to be Protector's Pride for the extra recharge, Qigong for the damage, and Critical Strike for the crit damage. Gems, standard again, damage. Accessories, we've got Saturnity Rings and Thermo Headgear for the crit rate and attack stat, and the Shackle Ring if you ever want to, fully chain 5 arts together into that Element Genesis for massive damage. Lone Exile, this is another evasion art tank like Full Metal Jaguar. I don't think it's quite as good, but it also has the ability to pass Awakening to the party. I guess this one does as well, but I'm running Ring of Roses here instead for the extra recharge. But it's very similar idea. You just don't have 3 evasion arts, you only have 2 from Aerial / Jackal Claw. And you've got high hit count arts again to trigger the recharge frequently. Jaws of Death just for extra damage and aggro. Resonant Flag to pass the Awakening you get from Deflector Field because you can use the Deflector Field, take some damage, and then pass Awakening to the party. Decent Awakening source damage. Qigong, Eye for Weak Points, Frenzy Combo, same exact thing as Full Metal Jaguar. Then for gems, this time I am using Brimming Spirit just because the damage of this class isn't quite as high as compared to the FMJ. Accessories, we've got Sturdy Rings, Lunar Rings, and Thermo Headgear. You're not going to need the art recharge like you do with the other one just because they're going to be recharging your crits enough anyways this way. And then Troubadour, we've got Troubadour's okay, but it's kind of out of class at this point. You've got, again, you got to use bad Canvas Master Arts and then Shield Art for combos and then ACD and Multi-Blast just for a little bit of extra healing. Twin Moons for removing buffs. Ring of Roses is probably the best thing this class has, but every class can do it anyway. Shadow Parade is okay, you just get a recharge faster, increased damage taken. Glitter Melody, because this class does have one niche, which is kind of funny with the end song, where when the class dies, it recharges everyone else's arts. So this class's goal is dying, actually. So you got Beaming Edge, all about support, Strengthening Gambit, just so that you can get those Glitter Melodies and party buffs and whatnot. Gems, you got Soothing Breath for Fine Blessing for, extra art duration, extra revives, and then Perilous Presence to hopefully start with the battle with aggro and hopefully get one shot so that you can recharge everyone's art without the need for a Capable Hands Glitter Melody. Accessories, we've got Soulless Rings, Fraternal Badge, and Victor Gauntlet to take even more damage to increase the odds of you getting one shot. And that is just for extra recharge and healing. Not too important. Signifer, this class is a very good substitute for Soul Hacker if you don't have it up, but I think Soul Hacker is still slightly better, but this class still works. Of course, you got Random Buff Generation from Resonant Flag Oriole, and then you've got Heal Harmony just to feel to charge up that Glittery Melody. And then on Master Art side, of course, you have Advanced Cooldown, and you have Shadow Eye to give yourself the attack up buff to pass with Resonant Flag consistently, and then Cross Impact, same thing, so you can give yourself Power Charge more consistently to pass the buffs along. In terms of skills, we've got Capable Hands just so you can Glittery Melody at the start, Strengthening Gambit to make the buffs last longer, and Protector's Pride for some extra recharge. Gems, we've got Buff Power, Buff Duration, and some Revive, pretty standard. Accessories, Soulless Rings for more healing, Prayer Necklace for better revives, and Fraternal Badge for more recharge. And we've got Yumsmith. Yumsmith is interesting because it can do a lot of weird things. So this is a player-controlled Yumsmith with the goal of, being able to buff the party a lot, but also maybe do some good smashes. So you got your Extended Slash Mighty Beat for some smash damage, Recharge for the crit field, Aerial Slash for some evasion, and then you also got Determination for a massive additive and damage reduction while you're inside the field, and then Deflector Field to give yourself Awakening and pass it off with the Resonant Flag. So you can use Determination, Deflector Field, that'll give you 50% damage reduction right there, and then you also have the Abundant Oceans and the Butterfly Dust defense up buff, and you can reach very high damage reduction very easily with this class. So it can also function as a tank, damage dealer, and buffer, so it can do a lot of weird things. Skills, we've got all damage for the crit rate so that we can get those easy damage cap smashes, because this class doesn't really have very good support skills to it. Gems, we've got Empowered Combo Analyze Weakness for damage boost, and then Swelling Blessing to increase the power of the Awakening buff that I can give and then give to the rest of the party. Although Awakening, for some reason, only affects damage dealt, it doesn't increase the recharge or damage reduction power, it only increases the additive damage. This is more of like a breaker AI controlled Yumsmith, so you've got Flashback, Glitter Streams, Triceps, 3 break arts, so you want to get those breaks as consistently as possible since this class is in a Fury Smash. And then even Crimson Lance for, being able to topple on top of landing the break. Recharge Determination just because they're good, and Glitter Melody because you're running, a bunch of positionals, so you can get that Glitter Melody charge pretty fast. Skills, so we've got Positioning Pro because we're running so many positionals, Capable Hands to get just Glitter Melody at the start, Protector's Pride for extra recharge to get that Glitter Melody off even faster. Gems, we've got Empowered Combo and Refined Blessing, and then Dispersed Bloodlust. This class isn't focused on doing damage and pretty low crit rate, so you don't really need the Analyze Weakness here, but Empowered Combo, you might as well run it. You could, I guess, swap it for Ironclad or something. Accessories, we've got Chakra Ring to increase the break chances further, Accomplish Fan Braces for more break chance, so that you're going to be breaking consistently due to the lack of Fury Smash, and then Fraternal Badge, more recharge. And we've got an Aponic Champion. This one's mainly for like challenge battle speed kills. They can sometimes work in like outside of that, but it's best in challenge battles, I'd say. So you've got a Tri-Slash with Shield Badge, because you could start the fight with a break. Here you can start the fight with like an instant break topple if you can land it correctly. Another break art with Flashback, I might as well run a launch art too. Evasion art on Refractive Edge, so you can dodge pretty consistently. Dual Flash, just like a low cooldown art to get your Tri-Slash up more quickly. Blossom Dance, just because defenders don't charge talent art that well, so just use a low cooldown one that doesn't really matter. Skills, we've got, I didn't put the skills in this one, did I? But you're probably just gonna want like put on like Dance of Barrages, maybe like a Beam and Edge for like party buff skills, and then of course like a Protector's Pride. While Protector's Pride is a little bit weird in this class because, naturally if you're a defender, you're going to take aggro, turn it off, but this class isn't too good at taking aggro on us. This one's more like a support combo class. Gems, we've got aggro generation. Again, if you're running, Protector's Pride there, you could swap that for like Ironclad or something. Empowered Combo Analyze Weakness, just for a little bit of extra damage, not too important. Accessories, Break Brooch for the break chance, Eternal Badge for the recharge, Thermal Headgear for the crits. You could run a Chakra Ring too if you wanted to, but for even higher break chance, but you don't always need that. Strategos, so Strategos, what you're going to want to do is use decent field effects to get the Glitter Melody off as just standard, and then Multi Blast for a little bit of extra healing, Mirror Trap to give the party counter heal buff to the whole party just as an extra buff or whatever you want to use that for. No Love Lost, just because Mother's Wind Hornet has a slightly higher ratio on heals, but it has a very long recharge, so you can use No Love Lost instead. Quick Draw just because it's good as a fused art because they can evade and do a lot of damage that way. Skills, we've got party buffs and Essence of Ether and all about support. The Dance Barrages you could run, but you can also run, of course, like Beam and Edge, Abundant Oceans, whatever you need there. Maybe even recharge. Buffs, Standard, Soothing Breath, Life Saving Expertise, and Swelling Blessing for the recharge. I guess you're running Power here, but you could also run Refined Blessing for those Glitter Melodies if you don't think the Mirror Trap is too important. Heavy Guard. Heavy Guard's an interesting tank because this one can pass Awakening pretty well to the party. So how you're going to do that is you're going to generate a lot of aggro with Uppercut Slash, Crash Out, Jackal Aerial Slash to do a lot of damage. And then keep the aggro, use that to get the Deflector Field up, and then use that once you get the Awakening from Deflector Field past the party with the Resonant Flag. Solid Stance for some damage reduction, because this class can damage reduction pretty well. Skills, you've got Qigong for damage, Natural Selection to get even more damage reduction, and Fighting Prowess for some extra aggro gain. Because this class isn't really running a crit-based setup. Gems, more block rate to get it up to 72%, so you're getting a ton of block rate. Aggro generation up because you're not doing like a ton of damage because you're not critting. And then Empowered Combo again for more damage. Accessory, Shield Belt to get that damage reduction up, so you're going to be getting very high damage reduction even without the Butterfly Dust buff. Turning Rings for extra damage, Hermit Mask for extra damage. Machine Assassin. So Machine Assassin of course wants to debuff a lot, but that's hard to do, so there are a few ways you can make it happen. Fatal Bite, of course, is very good. High ratio, low cooldown, big additive damage. Tyrant Cross is, of course, how you're going to get the debuffs stacked up on the enemy. Same with Viral Vector, those can both get the debuffs on. Terror Onslaught gives you debuff resistance down from behind, so you can get behind and somehow get that debuff resistance down. That'll make it easier in the future. And then Aerial Slash, Jackal Claw for damage, and Overfall just for either defense down. Another, like, debuff, essentially, because you're trying to stack those up. Skills, so Sappy Drain to increase your debuff chance. Further, Cypher Edge for extra crit rate, and Qigong for extra damage. So this class can still do damage pretty well, but if you learn those debuffs, it can get even higher. Gems, we've got Empowered Combo, Refined Incantation, Analyze Weakness. This one will increase the timer on the debuff so it'll last longer. You can maybe run Swelling Scourge too, but it's not like too important. I like these 2 damage gems more in most scenarios. Accessories, you're running Shackle Ring, of course, to increase the debuff chance further by chaining your arts together. Turning Rings for extra attack, Armor Mask for extra attack. There's a new craftable accessory that increases debuff chance like Sappy Drain as an accessory, but I don't have that one yet and haven't tested if it's super good, but you could swap like Hermit Mask for it since this class can already stack up additives pretty well from a couple skills. Then we've got Royal Summoner. So Royal Summoner, this is an Alma Genesis build. Problem is it's kind of hard to get positionals as Royal Summoner, honestly. Really only have like Flame Lord, and you could use like a Shadow Stitch to hit from behind. But that's not super consistent to be moving around a lot. So I just like Flame Lord, just get that Alma Genesis up eventually. You won't be able to spam it as effectively as some other classes. Summon Element, of course, because you want those elements. Discharge, just because you're going to be pretty high damage from that. Starfall, you can use as a combo. You can also run Power Effect if you want for an extra 80% additive. Could be useful. Jackal Aerial Slash for evasion arts, pretty solid, just good damage. Skills, we've got Protector's Pride for recharge, Critical Strike because this class has a pretty good crit rate, and one Qigong for decreasing defense again, because you're going to be using a lot of physical attacks actually, because Element Genesis is physical, even though, these are all ether attacks. Accessories, you got Saturni Rings. Shackle Ring, of course, pretty standard for an Element Genesis build, and Fraternal Badge for extra recharge, because you don't really have the benefit of getting the recharge from, like, Awakening that a Seraph has, but you can run, like, crit rate increase and stuff here, maybe a Thermo Headgear to get that crit rate up to, like, near guaranteed. Zephyr, so Zephyr is an agility tank, which isn't all that useful, so you're going to want to use some sort of other way to dodge attacks. So the way I'm doing that is with evasion arts of Quick Draw and Wide Slash. So you're going to be using Quick Draw, Air Fang fusions for generating a lot of damage, doing aggro. Rigid Slicer for a fast art that can be recharged very quickly because it has a super fast animation, a lot of hits, so you can recharge it quickly if you're running a Frenzy combo build like this. Wide Slash for the evasion. Butterfly Blade, first damage, and then Solid Stance for some extra damage reduction in case you do manage to get hit. Gemini Strike, just for more evasion. Skills, Frenzied Combo, like I said, to land those crits and get that recharge. Qigong for damage and aggro generation. And weak points to make sure you get that crit rate up to essentially guaranteed very quickly. Gems, Seal Protection for block rate. You can get it pretty high, 72%, so you're going to be blocking a lot of damage even if you do end up getting hit. And then Powered Combo and Less Weakness standard. Accessories, we've got Cerny Rings for damage increase, Thermal Headgear for critical rate increase, and Hermit Mask for damage increase again. So you're going to be critting, doing a lot of damage with this class, and hopefully dodging the attacks is the idea, rather than, relying on the agility stat, which it's high, but nowhere near enough. You got Stalker. This class, not very good at doing damage, but you can certainly try. So we got Rapid Shot, Quick Draw. Because Quick Draw's Fuse Rate has a ratio of essentially 540 plus 520. That's a massive ratio, 1060, which is huge for something like that. Plus, big additives on the Quick Draw, big additive on the Rapid Shot. But despite the name Rapid Shot is a very slow animation, so it ends up not actually being that much DPS, or it's just like a single very strong hit. But you're evading the whole time, so it could be useful there. Landslide for more evasion. Demolition for a high hit count. Ether Cannon for ether attacks, because you're running like an ether attacker build here, because everything's ether. Then you're going to run Driving Arrow for bleed. That's not really all that important, it's just a low cooldown art. Violent Streak for the high hit count, or being an ether attack, and the evasion. Skills, we've got Positioning Pro, you're running a lot of positionals. Critical Strike, because you're running a crit build, and then Protector's Pride for extra recharge. Gems, standard. Accessories, we've got Cerny Rings, Mercury Rings, because this class actually benefits from them more than Thermo Headgear, and then Hairpiece to lower that ether defense by 35%. Not quite as good as Qigong, of course, but still okay. Tactician, this class is very bad. This class is just you throwing a bunch of random stuff and hope it can find something to do. So it's got the field effects, maybe it can charge a Glittery Melody, maybe it can buff with the elemental summons, maybe it can heal a little bit, maybe it can combo. You're just trying things and hoping one of them works out. Oh, and then you're earning party buffs, of course. Support for the field, Protector's Pride, you could also put on Beaming Edge, party buff, whatever. You run Capable Hands, maybe it does that. There's not a whole lot this class can do, I'll be honest. Just trying its hardest. Gems are standard. Accessories, Soul Strengths for healing, Prayer Necklace for revives, Fraternal Badge for recharge. Pretty standard. Thaumaturge. Now this class is a little bit more interesting. Maybe it can actually work sometimes. Especially with the new accessory that might actually have buffed it quite a bit. They got Violent Flurry and Quick Draw for a pretty solid ratio, honestly, between the two attacks. Plus, this will ignore defenses. You can bypass those pretty well, even though Qigong will more than likely decrease those defenses anyways. Rank Splitter for some healing, Hidden Thorn for some damage. Another pretty solid ratio together in the fusions. And then Field Effects just to recharge that Glittery Melody, because you're also still wanting to be a support in some degree. Skills, all about support for the extra field, Protector's Pride for the recharge, Cypher Edge for a slightly higher crit rate. Gems, we got Refined Blessing because you're Glittery Melody, and then standard damage up gems. Accessories, we've got, this one's interesting because you're earning both Solus Rings and Saturnity Rings for a big increase to attack and healing, and the new Archsage's Flower Fan, which will increase attack, healing power, and HP by 30%, which will essentially give you 70% increase to attack and healing power. So you can actually get pretty good healing power and attack on this class. So will that be enough to save it? I don't know. You're sacrificing a lot of additive damage for, these big stats. It might be okay, honestly. Lost Vanguard, this is another face tank. So what you're going to do that is you want to use a Mighty Beat Fusion, Quick Draw, so that you can maybe smash, maybe generate a ton of aggro that way, and then the rest of the arts are all very bad, honestly. Shockwave, Electric Field, don't do a whole lot. Crash Out, maybe some aggro. Same with Hidden Thorn. Blossom Dance, just for fast recharge on a defender. Skills, we've got Ultimate Qigong for more damage, maybe. Eye for weak points, maybe you can run like crits and stuff. Mind for guarding, because you have a super high block rate, so you can face tank with block rate on top of damage reduction. Gems, Endless Weakness and Powered combo for damage, and Steel Protection for some more block rate. Accessories, we've got Shield Belt for some damage reduction, Thermal Headgear for crit rate, and Hermit Mask for added damage. You can also run, maybe attack increase and accessory too, but because this class has very few additives, this will be essentially 40% damage increase, while Hermit Mask is already 100, so maybe a little more mileage out of additives rather than increasing the attack stat here. And lastly, but certainly not least, at least close to not least, it's still pretty bad, we got Guardian Commander. So this class is again another face tank that does do a very good job at taking, because all the darts are very slow and bad and pretty low damage. Imperial Sword, 4 and 40 ratio, but it's got bad animation. Same with Falcon Swoop. Shield Bash, I guess, can topple, so that's probably the best art this class has. And then, interestingly enough, I tried something weird here. We're making this thing a buff stacker that can also defend, because, you know, naturally can Deflector Field, and then Oriole as well, to maybe get past a lot of buffs the Resident Flag. I'm not really sure. Kind of weird. Jekyll Claw for some evasion, might as well. Skills, we've got Natural Selection for some damage reduction, Qigong for some extra damage maybe, and Maniac, because this class literally has nothing else. Because, you know, of course, Prop Pride's already right there. Gems, we've got Swelling Blessing, Refined Blessing, because this class might try to buff and defend at the same time, and then Powered Combo for more damage. Accessories, we got Turning Rings, Hermit Mask for damage, and then Shield Belt for, you know, more damage reduction. And that's it for the class view, the classes and their builds. Oh man, I was not expecting that to last that long. I thought it was going to be like an hour max, and you know, I went well past that. Anyways, I guess thanks for sticking with me, listening to my ramblings for this long. I really like this game. I think the combat is very deep. You can do a lot of stuff with it while also being, you know, funny and broken at the same time, which Xenoblade 2 also did a pretty good job of that as well. Overall, yeah, thanks again for making it to the end of the video, and look forward to that chain attack guide that's going to happen sometime eventually. I swear, I promise. I think. Alright, well, I guess that's it. I'll see you all around.